from a fallout shelter somewhere under Seattle, Washington, it's the show you've been waiting for. Get ready to join your hosts, John and Kenrick, as they talk comics, movies, and more. Now here's Spoiler Country!
Alright, welcome back to Spoiler Country. I'm Kenrick and that is Mr. Horsley. And today, well, it's kind of a weird topic. It's not a weird topic. It's a topic that was somewhat broached during our Death of Superman review. And we talked a little bit about the fact of, I don't think the Death of Superman is the biggest deal as Johnny did. And we mentioned that X-Men #1 is the top selling of all time, which put you on a quest to actually figure out what is truly the best selling comic book. Is that a fair way to say it?
Yeah, that's a fair way to say it, and also a quest to kind of like extrapolate and explain the numbers a little bit, because numbers can be manipulated to mean whatever you want to mean. You know?
Before we get into this, because I'm okay with what I already know what you're going to say, and I already read the reports of what you've brought up. But let's make sure that everybody is on the. Let's just be aware of everything. One, in 2011, the Guinness Book of World Records identified X-Men #1 as the top selling comic book of all time. Okay. And two, you can go to 2 or 3 different websites and get 2 or 3 different. But what Johnny has compiled, or what he has found out, I shouldn't say you didn't compile it, somebody else did, and he'll give the proper credit where credit's. But what he found out is very interesting in that it should be looked at somewhat slightly skewed. There should be a little asterisk by X-Men #1, I think.
I think there should too.
Yeah, based on the fact that they've had so many covers, and you had to get all 5 covers to create the big giant cover. Which is funny because Jamie Sullivan was just talking about that the other day with his G.I. Joe stuff. Same kind of thing, but they're doing it per issue, not one issue that has 5 different covers to create one big cover. So there's some marketing ploy, some trickery going on to get that 8 million, or actually it depends on where you look at. It's either 7.1 or 8.1, or I've even heard 11 million. So you got to kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. But that being said, why don't you go into what you found out? Sure.
So there's a website I use for this, and I like the site because it pulls information from a website called Comicron, COMICHRON, which is like the standard for publication and records and like what things top selling comic books each month. It's a well respected site people use to determine sales and print runs of comics, right? So this website takes all their information from that site and kind of extrapolates stuff out of it, which is great because this is what I was going to do, and they did all the work for me, so I love it.
Right. Well, Comicron says that X-Men #1 is the top selling, but again, the breakdown, they do a breakdown on top of that.
Right. They do. They say it's a top selling comic book with 8.1, almost 8.2 million copies printed. However, that's including all covers printed. So that's including people who bought all 5 covers. So they bought 5 copies of the same book just because the cover was different, right?
Which a lot of people did.
Which a lot of people did, right? Which I think that's an asterisk. That's not really, I don't know. That's not the same book selling multiple times, to different people or whatever. It's people buying different covers to have the same book with a different art on the front, nothing else. It's all subjective, right? But what this other site does, which is Hockney's Comics, HOKNES comics.com. Yeah. And we'll have links in the show notes about all this stuff. But what they've done is they've extrapolated out the print runs of each cover and then put those in order of highest selling print runs of each cover, right? So if a book only had 1 cover, then it's on here one time. If a book had 5 covers, there's 5 different listings for that one book for each cover and how much that cover itself sold.
Yeah. Yeah, which is interesting actually when you go through that, because you'll see that some of them are quite a bit less.
Yeah, it really is. And the #1 they have here is is interesting too. But it does fall into the same guidelines as X-Men #1. There's just no way to break it out, right? So it's X-Force #1 for 1981 sold roughly 5 million. They say 5 million. I've heard 7 million. A ton of copies, right? But there's only X-Force #1, right? From Rob Liefeld and them.
Yeah,
but it was the biggest comic in 1991. But it has, it doesn't have multiple covers. However, each issue came polybagged with a trading card, and there were 5 different trading cards. So people would buy
but you couldn't
multiple
see what
covers.
That trading card was, right?
Right. So people would buy multiple of them. And I think you could see it on the back. On the back side, it was facing outward. You could see who it was. So you could buy all 5 and get all 5 cards without opening it. But so people would buy 5 covers to get all of all 5 copies, you get all the trading cards. So
Oh my God.
it still falls into the whole variant cover thing.
Yeah.
But there's only one cover. They varianted it with the trading cards, so it sold between 5 to 7 million somewhere. I mean, right? Yeah. So I mean, whatever. And then X-Men #1 sold to 8.2 million, but like the cover that sold the most for them was
Is it the one with Cyclops and Wolverine on the cover?
the one with Cyclops. Yeah, Cyclops Wolverine sold 2.1 million copies because it's got Wolverine. I mean, it's not about Cyclops; it's about Wolverine.
Right.
Right. And then
Nobody likes Cyclops. I don't know anybody that goes, "Oh, I really want to get Cyclops' first appearance."
Right. No, I mean, who cares? Well, I mean, it's X-Men #1, right? So it's whatever,
right. But I'm just saying, you know what I mean? I don't know anybody that specifically just wants to collect Cyclops.
Right. Yeah, I know. It's dumb. Who cares?
Yeah.
But like going through what prompted this was that conversation where you were telling me how X-Men #1 was a bigger impact and a bigger selling point for comics in the 90s, right? Or the biggest thing in the comics world. I can't remember how you worded it, but
it was only going by the numbers.
Right, but the numbers are still false and here's why.
It's not false, but it's there's an asterisk.
It's an asterisk, but even with the asterisk, like Death of Superman sold more copies, even with the asterisk, right? Because
Death of Superman didn't sell over 8 million copies.
Hear me out. If we're going to include all 5 covers of that, then you have to include Death of Superman, because Death of Superman's not one issue. Death of Superman is an event.
No, we're only talking one issue. You can't add all.
You can take the first 10 issues of X-Men #1 and call it that way, but the Death of Superman itself, the issue 75
that's not what
by itself.
We're only talking about but those numbers are individual comic books, not not a storyline, not an arc, not 6 issues or 5 issues. It's one issue.
Right, but in the conversation that prompted this off, I was literally saying the Death of Superman event was the biggest thing to happen in comic books, and you were saying no, the print of X-Men. You were comparing a 1-issue comic book to an event that I was talking about. I was talking about the whole event as a whole, not just the one issue.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
And going up on that, then I mean, Superman 75, where he dies in, sold 3 million copies by itself, just the black bag edition, not counting the regular edition or any of the 17,000 second print, third
is there
print,
variants
14.
of it?
Well, there's the polybag edition, right, which was the direct market.
Right, which everybody got. That's the one that everyone was standing in line to get.
There was the newsstand variant, which was it out of the bag without the stuff with it.
Oh, I didn't know they had that.
Right. Well, it wasn't a variant, really. It was just the newsstand copy, the copy you'd go buy from your grocery store. It wasn't in a polybag. That was the difference.
Oh, so if you're smart, you go buy your polybag at the store, at your LCS, and then go to the grocery store and buy the unbagged one.
Right, exactly. But then they they also had like a second print, a third print, a fourth print. I think it went to 5 printings, right?
Yeah.
So like you can tell what's interesting about comic books is you can tell how good the book is selling, right? By how it's really, if it goes to multiple printings, you've got a good book, right? And your book had an impact.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a second print of X-Men #1, right?
I don't know.
But I don't think
why
there
would
is.
there be? There's so many copies out there.
Why would they make a second print of Superman 75 when they sold 3 million of just a black bag edition?
Yeah, did they?
Right? They made 5 printings.
Oh, that might be a DC thing.
Marvel does it too. Marvel does multiple printings too.
Yeah, but it
books
depends
that
on the initial print run.
Right. Well, initial print run's based upon orders. But what happens is X-Men #1, like in this case, X-Force #1, I think X-Force had a second printing and X-Men #1 has, I think they both had second printing. I looked it up before and I don't have it in front of me.
That's fine.
I think they both had second printings, whatever. But like the way it works in the comic industry is initial print run is based upon initial orders, right?
Yeah.
On your FCE orders. So based upon hype, they order usually if the hype is big, the stores will order more, right? So, but when a book goes back to a second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth printing, like Justice League #1 from New 52 had 8 different printings.
Yeah.
What that means is people ordered it went to stores, it's sold out, people came back in still wanting it. So they kept getting more orders for it, so had to go back to the printers multiple times, and they would do more orders. It would sell out. More people would want it. It would do more orders. It would sell out, and kind of go back through the process over and over again. It would hit those FCE orders, fulfill them all, and then more people would still come back into wanting it. So what ended up happening with like Superman.
I love how passionate you get when it comes to Superman, and I mean that seriously.
Because everybody shits on him so fucking hard. Everybody shits on the power of Superman so hard. It's like
he's overpowered. It's not anything else but that he's so overpowered. It's crazy. It's like name one person, name any other superhero that can go toe to toe with Superman and actually survive if he was using his whole power set.
I mean, that's not what this debate is about, but they're out there.
I'm just saying but you just brought up everybody shits on him, but that's
they do,
why.
and I'm literally just talking about the sale, the selling power of this series that from the 90s, right? Because even Adventure 500, which is when Superman comes back after DC not printing Superman for 4 months, right?
Right.
Like they didn't print a Superman book for 4 months. They didn't take their second biggest or biggest character, depending on what numbers you want to look at, of the 90s of all time, and didn't put him in a book for 4 months, right?
Yeah.
They came back and that book sold 3.7 million copies, just the white polybag version, not the newsstand version by itself.
How many?
And there was 3.7. It sold more than Superman 75, right?
Yeah.
So the two, out of the top 5, slots 2 and 3 go to 2 Superman books, right? From the Death of Superman series, 2 big books. And people say those books are worthless right now, right? Like you can buy X number 1 in quarter bins, right? It's pretty much an overprinted
so many of
book.
them, yeah.
Right. Well, Superman 75 and Adventure 500, the polybag versions, they're still, there's 3 million, almost 4 million printed copies of those books. You go to a convention, you're still going to find those books selling for $10, $20, $30.
Sure, you can find X-Men number 1, though. People try to get like $10, $15 for that thing.
Right. But you won't find Superman 75 in the quarter bin. You won't find Adventure 500 polybag in the quarter bin or in the dollar bin. You will find X-Men 1s in there all day long.
I don't think you'll find not in the quarter bin. Not in the dollar bin. Dude, I've never seen them below $5.
Dude, I've seen so many X-Men 1s in dollar bins over the last 10 years. Like so many.
You're biased.
You can think I'm biased all you want, but I've seen them
You are
there.
biased, though. And it's okay. I mean, but you're not wrong in the fact that he sold 3 million and
on a single issue with
on a
one
single
cover.
issue.
Yeah.
Just talking about just the Death of Superman, the single issue at 3 million. And really, if you looked at X-Men number 1, even though it's identified as the best-selling comic book of all time, there's an argument there because you're talking about 5 separate books being combined into one sale.
Right, exactly.
That's really
5
what's
separate
going
sales. On. Yeah. Now, I mean, you could also argue from the other side. You could say, well, people were buying 5, 10 copies of Superman 75 because it was an investment package, right?
Yeah, there was people doing that.
Right. But people did the same thing with X-Men 1. The same thing because it was the first new X-Men book.
Those
it was
are
the
poor
same
speculations.
Process. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, talk about books that'll never be worth all that much.
No, they won't be.
Never will. Either one of them will ever be worth more than $50.
No.
Because there's so many copies out there.
Superman 75 and Adventure 500, there's also a platinum version that was a retailer incentive version. That one's worth a lot of money, but that's because there's only like, I think 1,000 of them or like 750 or something like that.
So to go back to the original, I don't want to say argument because I guess it really wasn't an argument.
The original topic of discussion.
Yeah, the original topic of discussion of you were saying that you thought that the Death of Superman was the biggest event in comic book, right?
Yeah, I think it is.
But what makes you say that?
Well,
because I have an event that I think trumps it.
Okay, well, don't tell me what it is yet. No. Let me say my first.
Yep. So
the reason why I think that is because one, it was the biggest comic book event of the 90s.
Wait. A single event. Let's just make sure that's a single event.
Yeah. Death of Superman includes it's the death and the return is all one story, right? It's all one big thing. So I'm including return in this as well.
But I'm just talking about a single moment.
Okay, well
that's how I took it when you were talking, not the full story arc.
Well, even then, the single moment of Death of Superman by himself, of just the act of killing Superman, of killing the world's first superhero, of killing essentially at the time of the 90s, the most recognizable character in the world. Basically, a character that in costume and out of costume is number 1. Or was number 1 and number 4 being Superman and Clark Kent on the most recognizable fictional characters in the world above Mickey Mouse, right?
Yeah.
Of the 90s. He was, incredibly popular. They did a storyline where they killed him. It was the first time a main character of that caliber, an A-list character that, had been around since the 30s was going to be.
Does that matter though?
Was going to be killed. That does matter.
A-list? You think it matters that it's an A-list for it to be a significant event?
Yeah, because the Death of Gwen Stacy was important, but it would have been that would have been a bigger event had they killed Spider-Man, right?
I think the Death of Gwen Stacy is a bigger deal, and it changed the way comic books were written after that. Before and after, yeah, it did. You could still find people.
Well, let me finish. Let me finish what I'm talking about this, and then we'll go into that. I don't want to derail too fast. Well, let me finish my spiel on this, and then we'll talk about Gwen Stacy. So, not only was it the first time they had killed a major character, because the whole thing about Superman before that was you can't kill Superman. Superman's unfallible. He's super powerful. You can't, nothing can touch him.
But they didn't really kill him.
He died a human death, but I'm not going to debate that.
Yeah.
They killed him essentially. He was gone for 4 months out of publication. In the storyline, if you read the storylines, the next issue takes place right after when he dies in, but they put the 4 month pause on printing for effect, right? Or whatever. It has in the top 10 single issues of being sold. Now I know you want the event, but like it is the event or the thing, but it is what happened around the death is the event, right? In the top 10 single issues sold, Death of Superman consists of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, right? Action 500, Superman 75, and then all of the die cut 101s, the ones that introduce all the new Superman. That's the top 10, 6 of the top 10 single issue selling comic books of all time come from that event. Hold on. All right, I need you to want to say hi to Kenrick? Say hi.
Hi, bye.
Bye.
They're home sooner than I thought they would be.
By like 30 minutes.
I know. I didn't think they're going to be home until like, all right, Jack, play, okay? So, out of the top 10 single issue selling, the event consists of 6 of them. And if you just look at the one issue, it's the Death of is the third highest single issue. And if you take out variants, it's the second highest, and it's second highest to the next issue in the in the run, which is Adventure 500. And it was an event talked about on the news. There was a Newsweek cover about it. It was on local news. It was on national news. It was in the paper. Like, it was covered in mainstream media. Like, before this event, besides the movies, what comic book event was covered in mainstream media? There wasn't one.
But DC is a major publisher. They created the media event that why you saw it on the news. They pushed that to market it the way that came across. If they didn't market it and they didn't push it like that, it would have been just another comic book on the shelf. And comic book nerds and people who collect would have freaked out about it, but it wouldn't have been on the news and it wouldn't have been like that. That was created by DC. I don't think it's fair to put that on there because, of course, they made a huge event out of it.
I disagree to some degree. I think that I agree that that DC made an event because they're owned by Warner Brothers, whatever. They made an event, which it's marketing wonderful. However, I think as soon as that book came out and people started reading it and fans started reacting to it, that the reaction to that would have hit mainstream media because of how impactful and how important to Americana Superman is, right? I think that even if DC hadn't pushed it like that, it would have gotten out there. It would have been on the news. It would have been talked about outside of just comicdom.
I don't think it would have been talked about like it was, though.
No, of course not. Of course not. But it still would have. It's a comic event that it still would have.
It's so weird, dude, because I collected comic books at that time, and I had a lot of friends that collected comic books. Nobody liked that. Nobody collected Superman, and nobody bought. My mom bought me that comic book because she thought I would want it, and she went down to Cliff's Comic World in Fred Meyer and purchased that book. I never read it, And
so we had different friends
it's
growing up.
So
like
weird.
Everybody I knew.
Here you go, like, oh, the comic book fans, because it's like, what fans? I didn't know anybody that read it. Everybody loved the movies because the movies were great, but I didn't know anybody that actually read the books.
See, everybody I knew that read comics was heavy into this because I also grew up DC. I grew up reading DC with my dad with very little Marvel until later on, but. All the comic shows I went to back there with my dad, this was the talked about event of the show. I mean, everybody I knew at school that read comic books, which was only a couple of kids, was, Superman was dying.
See, for me, when I think about what the storyline means and what the actual event meant, right? To me, Gwen Stacy has more lasting impact because wait, let me finish. People were invested into Gwen Stacy because it was like a dramatic romance going through. And here's Peter Parker just getting out of high school, and that is his first love. This is before Mary Jane. And all of a sudden, this character that they followed with the will they, won't they, dies. And people freaked out. I don't know if you've gone back and read some of the stuff that people did, but Marvel got a lot of hate mail. People threw away their Spider-Man comic books. You can talk to people that read that as it came out today, and you'll hear them get choked up about it because they were so invested in what they were reading. And it came out of nowhere. And everything that led up to that and then after that has changed the way a lot of comic books have been written because here was an established character, and it wasn't an A character. I mean, you might even called her a C character at that time,
Yeah.
But they made it. It was a surprise thing, and I feel like that made a big difference. Not only did it change the way Peter Parker as Spider-Man was, but it changed the way people thought of ancillary characters from then on out. Superman's event, though it's big and a big deal, it was still a gimmick, and they knew that he was going to die, and they knew that he was being resurrected 4 months later. It wasn't, Gwen Stacy's only around now because a multiverse and it was a thing. But that original Gwen Stacy is gone. She still affects Peter Parker today, and and Superman's death hasn't affected anything anymore except for a new movie, Batman versus Superman Justice, whatever, and then Doomsday animated cartoon, and then the Death of Superman cartoon. It's not a lasting effect.
It affected the entirety of the DC universe for years. Like, it was a rippling effect through the whole DCU for years after that.
For years?
Yeah, through the early 2000s, yeah.
How?
And because the ramifications of Superman dying and what happened in that time frame came back because Doomsday came back and it changed the dynamic of certain things. And
wait, Doomsday
Superman had to be different. Yeah, Doomsday, not the same Doomsday, but there was the Superman Doomsday Hunter Prey storyline that came out.
Yeah,
there was the
Educate me, man. I don't know. I don't know this stuff. For me, it's like that was an event that happened, and then I never heard about it after that, except for the
How would you never hear about it? It's been okay. I mean, I find that strange because, Death of Gwen Stacy is a huge event, and I agree with you on everything you said. Right? I think Death of Gwen Stacy was the first time that in a comic book. Well, it wasn't the first time, right? Because that exact same thing had happened in the Golden Age for characters, right?
Sure,
before the Comics Code Authority, right? What's that?
Bucky died.
Yeah, but that was in the 50s. That was. I mean,
yeah, but I'm just saying there's been other times that characters have died. That's all.
Right.
Yeah.
Gwen Stacy was a lasting effect, and it is a big deal.
It's still lasting though. That's the thing.
It's not. It is and it isn't though, because they've retconned and rebooted Spider-Man.
They have never retconned Gwen Stacy's death into the history of the psyche of Peter Parker. They have never done that. That has always been a part of his, and it always will be.
I don't know enough about it to argue that point, but what I do know is in the last 10 years they've rebooted Spider-Man 5 times. And that they haven't done it again. I don't know how it could be a part of his storyline if they've rebooted it from the beginning. They've
never rebooted it to where he's in high school and have Gwen Stacy back as a character.
They most certainly have.
Where?
Yes, they have.
When?
The most recent Spider-Man run where they introduced Silk and they introduced
what are you talking about? No, he was like a rich billionaire having a thing.
That's Superior Spider-Man. After
no, they didn't. I collected it. No, it wasn't. The last actual reboot was in 2015, and he's a rich freaking software technology guy like Tony Stark, and then he loses it all.
Okay, I said I just know they've rebooted shit, and they added new characters in high school,
all the way back to high school, and then not have Gwen, and then have Gwen Stacy and all that. If they have, I'd be surprised. I'm not saying. You know what? Honestly, I shouldn't say that you're wrong because I haven't read every single thing that's come out in the 2000s up to now. Because who knows what they've done.
I just know that when they rebooted Spider-Man after Superior Spider-Man, they went back to the high school time. Maybe it was a flashback. I don't know. I didn't read them all. But they added the character of Cindy Moon, who becomes Silk. And I don't know if that was they went back there and started there, or if it takes place after Superior. I don't know. I didn't read them. I just know they added a new character in high school.
Right. I think that it's interesting to sit and think, what is the most... I mean, because Death of Superman, you can definitely say is a very iconic. You can say you might even have the argument to say it is the most iconic, as you believe, right? And I'm not opposed to believing that. After thinking about it after a while, I don't know. And you could easily make an argument for Gwen Stacy. And there's probably other events that have happened that we could say, oh, well, to me, Gwen Stacy is different in its own right because it was such a shock. And it was such a difference of how she died, and it was a permanent thing, and all this kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's what other events out there do people feel could elevate to this type of argument, or this type of conversation?
If this conversation was happening 20 years ago, you would say the death of Jean Grey, but they've brought her back and killed her 1,000 times.
Yeah, Jean Grey.
So
but that was the death of the Phoenix Force more than it was Jean Grey, actually.
Right. And if you go back,
on the moon,
right. I mean, there's lots of deaths that have been impactful in the comic book world, but I think,
have they do this so much of them dying and coming back, dying and coming. Well, it dilutes it.
So the only person to stay dead in comic books is Uncle Ben, right? He's the only one to stay dead. Everybody else has come back, right? Gwen Stacy's come back in different forms, whatever universes, whatever. She's been in other stories since then.
Right. Well, she's Spider-Gwen now.
Whatever. Uncle Ben is the only freaking character to stay dead. Period. But Thomas Wayne? I mean, would you count the
the multiverse.
I mean,
where because where Bruce gets shot and dies, and then Thomas Wayne becomes Batman.
Let me rephrase it then. Uncle Ben is the only character to stay dead, not to be used again in some alternate form.
He's never been used again?
Not that I'm aware of, no. And he's it was always, for a long time, it was Uncle Ben and Bucky Barnes were two of the characters, Uncle Ben, Bucky Barnes, and Jason Todd were characters that died and stayed dead, right? But they brought back Bucky Barnes, they brought back Jason Todd, oddly at the same time, almost the same month. But Uncle Ben has not come back and not had, I don't think, he's been in other origin stories, he's been like, memories and stuff like that, but they haven't like brought back in, Earth 1927 8 Uncle Ben, who's a crime fighter in a jetpack. They haven't done that shit from as far as I know. But like everybody else comes back, it's just I don't know. It's and I can totally argue. I can totally take your side and argue that Gwen Stacy is a bigger event, but I think
it's not a bigger event media wise. It's not a bigger event sale wise.
Right. It just
I think
the original conversation
effect it has is a little bit more.
Yeah, the original conversation, the original question we had on the Death of Gwen episode was the biggest impact to comics. Yeah. Right.
And I think that can be internalized. I guess the only way that we would really say is if we line up 100 creators and say, what's the biggest impact in comic book history that influenced your flow, your creative outflow, Because then it's like
I think that might be too big of a question though, but yeah, I know what your intent there is.
Yeah, because then it's like, okay, because for you it's the death of Superman, but at the same time, like, what if I wrote and drew comic books and was not a Superman fan? That wouldn't impact me at all. I'd be like, well, I'm doing my own thing. And then Todd McFarlane's Spawn has been a huge influence on.
Well, Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man's a huge influence too.
Oh yeah, I think that's actually a bigger influence on.
Who we should note is number 4 on the all-time list with 2.5 million copies for just the one cover.
Yeah, that was a great. That was the first 10 issues of that was great.
The Torment run is amazing.
Yeah, I don't know about the rest of it because I think I stopped reading about it after.
I only read the Torment run, to be honest.
Yeah, when is the Torment run? Like the first 6?
Yeah, it's the first 5, I think.
Yeah. I remember when I think we brought this up before. I always remember when Spawn used to have a countdown.
Yeah,
and then they just stopped doing the countdown. As far as I
don't know. I only read the first.
Every time he used his powers, it was in the Torment run. Every time he used the power.
Oh, for Spider-Man?
No, you're talking Torment for Spider-Man. I'm thinking.
Yeah. Spider-Man Torment is the first 5 issues of Spider-Man is a story called Torment by Todd McFarlane.
Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah. But I don't know. It's a hard question to answer, but I think to answer the question or to kind of like drive the conversation to a point is, I think if we're asking what was the biggest impact to comics as a whole in the mainstream, right? If we add that in the mainstream, which was the intent of the original conversation on the Death of Superman episode,
right?
But I think got floored.
Sorry,
I think no, it's fine. I think that the Death of Superman event as a whole is the most impactful event to the comic book world in the mainstream as a whole, right? It's for good or bad, and it's one of the most talked about events of all time, good and bad, right? Yeah. You've made an impact when people can't stop bitching about your work, right?
right.
So
if everybody's complaining all the time, then you're doing something right.
Here we are, 20, 30 years later, doing an episode about it after doing an episode about the cartoon that came out about this storyline, when there's about another cartoon that was out. And
well, to be fair, if you wouldn't have done the research to figure it out what the thing was, we would never had this. We wouldn't have had this.
I know. It's all me in the research. Otherwise, you wouldn't do anything, right?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
I'm kidding.
No, I get it, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying.
I know.
Your love for Superman.
It's not that the love. It's
It's okay, dude. Own it, dude. You love that character.
Let me talk.
No,
it's just that people shit on him so much and shit on everything about it, and it's like, no. Even if I don't know. There's nobody in the comic world that people hate more than Superman, but also love more than Superman. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah. There's definitely opposing forces on either side. You either love him
the most haters in comic world.
There's like, you either love him or you're like, he's all right, or you hate him.
Right.
I'm the he's all right.
Well, and it's funny because, and this is gonna sound like Superman fanboyism and whatever, I don't give a shit, but
as you should.
The people who hate Superman And I honestly say this about most characters, even characters that I don't like. I don't hate any character, right?
Right.
There's characters I don't like,
Right.
but I don't hate any character. But people who hate Superman, and there are a ton of people who genuinely hate Superman.
You don't usually get along with them?
No, it's not that. It's they don't understand Superman. They don't try to understand. They don't know enough. They don't try to understand, right? Because people just don't give it a chance, you know. And that's
the hopefulness.
Well, not even the hopefulness. They hear this narrative from people, and it's funny because a lot of the people who I talk to at cons who dislike Superman a lot haven't read Superman. They watch the movies and like, okay, whatever. He's just a Boy Scout in the movies. But they don't read the comics. They don't know anything about the comics.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So they're judging it based upon what other people tell them, which is a fucking horrible thing to do, and they're judging it based upon their idea of what people have placed around this character. Now, if he was such a horrible character and he was just so overpowered and unlikable or whatever, he wouldn't be around 80 years later, you know?
Sure.
I mean,
he's not unlikable. I mean, from what I've read and stuff, I've liked the stories. I've enjoyed them. I've watched all the animated movies, and I think I've seen every single cartoon episode with him in it. Like, and I'm counting the original Max Fleischer stuff. Is it Max Fleischer?
Yeah, the old cartoons.
Yep. I've watched
Max
all of
Fleischer,
those.
yeah.
I've watched all Super Friends because I grew up with that. I've watched the Justice Leagues, all the Justice League's cartoons and movies, and I watched his cartoon run when he was side by side with Batman and everything else.
That was a good run
in between. So I've always enjoyed watching Superman. I grew up with those movies. I mean, dude, Christopher Reeve was my hero.
You just like to make fun of him to me and piss me off.
I do. There's a little bit of that because it's a hot button for you, which makes it fun to put. And
I'm gonna start making fun of Magic all the time.
I'm not gonna. You can go ahead. It doesn't affect me the same way as it affects you.
Well, pretend it does.
But there is.
Act
he
like
is
you care.
overpowered. They need to step that down like a little bit. I mean,
They have though. Like they really have in the comics. He's not.
Have they?
Like yeah. I mean, in the Rebirth and stuff. Like he's not all powerful in the comics. He has been for a long time. I mean, they added the super flare in like Superman New 52, like 20 something or other. I don't know.
Super flare. What is that?
It's where he can. It's an ability where he can like expel all of his stored solar energy at one time, like a bomb. And it sounds kind of hokey,
That's
but
kind of cool, actually.
right? But it leaves him vulnerable. It leaves him human.
Right.
At the end, he is no longer invulnerable. He is no longer has any powers.
Oh, interesting.
And he has to reabsorb, which takes a long time. So in New 52, he used the super flare to beat a big bad guy, and then he spent the next several issues depowered, still trying to fight crime and still doing what he has to do. So you got a depowered Superman still trying to go out there and be bulletproof.
Yeah. What? That's interesting. That's
The unfortunate part is it was drawn by John Romita Jr., who I can't stand his artwork.
John Romita Jr.
I just can't. I mean, he's done some stuff that's fantastic, but his Superman run, it seemed lazy to me.
Oh, you didn't like it?
Not at all. So much so that I stopped reading it. It was.
So would you say you like the guy,
lazy.
but you don't care for his artwork?
Well, I don't even know if I like the guy. I don't know anything about him.
I'm just teasing you about your life.
Except that I've read interviews. I read people report that he's openly said he doesn't give a shit about the quality of the work, just getting it turned in on time and getting paid.
Oh, that's
if that is true, I don't care for that.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Hey, so you mentioned there's no characters that you hate, but there's characters that you don't like. Give me a couple characters.
Well, every time I try and think about characters I don't like, I find a way to like them, which is weird.
Really, like Shatterstar?
Well, I mean, no, not Shatterstar, but I don't like Cyclops, right? But who does? It's
Cyclops. It's funny. Cyclops is very similar in temper to Superman, but he's just
he's
dumb.
not. No, he's not.
See, you can't even take that. You can't take any kind of comparison to him.
Every character that's wants to push to do good does not equal Superman. Okay.
No, but Cyclops is very much
I hate that term.
Well, it's true though, dude. I'm sorry that there's not a better term to describe it, but you can't sit there and tell me that Superman is not the ultimate Boy Scout because, good Lord, he is.
I don't agree with that, but
you hate that.
Well, I do because I don't think he's the ultimate Boy Scout. It's not. I don't know. That's not.
Why is that bad?
Opinion. Huh?
Why is that bad?
It's not necessarily a bad thing, but you lump it around and you throw it around like it's a terrible thing to be.
Is it a terrible thing to you? I don't think it's a terrible thing. I didn't say that him being a Boy Scout sucks. I don't know how else to identify somebody that's that moral, that has the moral high ground like that at all times. I don't know how else to describe it. You know, he is. I mean,
he's a Boy Scout, I guess, in the fact that he always wants to do the right thing.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, he's constantly wanting to try to do the right thing, and sometimes it's to a detriment.
Yeah, and it's
but other times it's weird. You read a book and he's like, you know, like we read that book that Godleski did, and at the end, those aliens just run away, and they just got done completely destroying the city, and it was like, okay, that was weird.
That was totally out of character.
Yeah, that was the writer. That wasn't.
Yeah, like I didn't. So here's a character I used to not like, but now I kind of like. Yeah. That was Nightwing. I used to hate Nightwing.
You used to hate Nightwing? Why?
I hated Nightwing. I thought it was dumb that Dick Grayson wasn't Robin. That Dick Grayson left Batman.
It just bothered you?
Nightwing. Well, it did.
As a fan what?
Huh?
As a fan?
As a fan, as a reader, it bothered me that Dick Grayson went on to become Nightwing. I thought Nightwing kind of stupid costume. I didn't get it. I didn't bother trying to read any of the stuff he was in.
Yeah.
I mean, I liked Tim Drake as Robin a lot, but I didn't really. I was like, well, I mean, Nightwing is just a lame character.
But you wanted the original dynamic duo in your pages.
Well, I mean, I guess, but like then I read some Nightwing. I was like, oh, this is actually he's.
Well,
actually
how old were you though when you hated
character.
Nightwing?
I'm late teens, early 20s.
Yeah, that makes sense because you're used to seeing a certain way, and then when it changes, actually, it didn't even change for you. It was
because I grew up with Tim Drake as Robin.
Yeah, it was Jason Todd in the 80s.
Yeah. I just grew up not liking Nightwing because he's a loser.
I think it was in the 70s that changed, right? When Teen Titans?
Yeah, what's that? He changed Nightwing?
Yeah.
Yeah, Tales of Teen Titans number 44 from like 1986. I wasn't reading comic books back then.
Oh, I was. That was 1986 is when he changed? I thought
so.
It was before that.
It might have been. It was Tales of Teen Titans number 44.
Oh, well, there you go.
And it was published. I'm looking it up right now it was published. Yeah, July of 84.
Oh, 84.
Yeah.
Yeah.
July 84.
Okay, because see, even I reading the comic books don't remember Dick Grayson as Robin.
Yeah, he stopped being Robin then, and then that's when Jason Todd came in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of funny that you hated him, but it kind of makes sense too, though. Because you're just like, but then when you get older and then you start reading some of it, you're like, oh, this is actually, I can kind of understand where he was coming from, being under the thumb of Batman for so long.
Right, exactly.
And wanting to be more of what he wanted to be. And at some point, you got to be able to grow and leave the nest.
Yep.
But this is so off topic.
I for no reason that I can think of, don't like any of the original Image comics pretty much.
Oh, what was you had Spawn was their first one.
Spawn was okay, but I didn't really care for it.
Yeah.
Wildcats and all those Gen 13, I didn't really care for any of those comics.
Gen 13 was interesting. It was drawn really well.
What was Jim Lee?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
It's funny, that's what I remember about Gen 13. I don't remember any of the storylines. I don't even remember any of the characters, but I remember the art.
Yeah, I remember the art. The art was fantastic. I just didn't care for any of the I don't know. I think the Image comics to me were just like, they were overly artistic. There was just too much going on, and was too.
Well, that's what they wanted, right? I mean, it was a bunch of artists that broke off and said, "Hey, we'll start our own thing."
Yeah, it was just they did that. I don't know. I've gone back and I've read some of them. Some of they're not bad. Just, for a long time, I just didn't. I was like, nope, this is all garbage. I don't want this. And Image Comics was the first comic book company that you could really tell was using computer graphics or computer colorists, right?
Yeah.
So coloring on like Photoshop or whatever programs they were. And I was at the time I was like, this isn't hand done. This is dumb. Elitist bullshit.
You got to be elitist and like totally old school. These kids today don't know what they're doing.
Right. Back in my day, they did it with watercolors or whatever. But I don't know.
We got to draw our panels walking uphill in the snow. And
both ways.
Color it going uphill in the snow.
Right. But anymore, I don't really care. And I don't really hate any characters anymore. I just don't care. If I don't like the character, I'm just not going to read it,
Yeah.
And I've found that there's most characters, I can find some reason to like the character or reason to at least enjoy what they're in, I used to think Booster Gold was stupid, but then I read, Blue Beetle and Booster Gold. I was like, oh no, this is actually kind of fun.
Yeah. For me, it's like the older I get, the more I just appreciate work that somebody's putting in to put that out.
Exactly. It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. And if, and people can poo-poo it all they want or they're not into it, that's fine. You don't need to be. But if you really want to enjoy what's going on, take a read and then think about what goes into and the penciling, and then on top of that they have to ink it, and then they have to color it, and then you got to letter it, and then someone's got to write it.
Yeah.
And put it this way, go take a piece of paper and write 4 or 5 panels and draw something in each panel, and then do all those steps we just said, and tell me how long it took you to do one page.
Exactly. Right. It takes a long time. I'm just so sick of outrage marketing. I'm sick of that. Yeah. And I'm just sick of all the hate thrown at things for something someone doesn't like for whatever reason. And it's I don't know. If you don't like something, don't support it. Right.
Right. You don't have to say anything.
Bitch about it. Yeah. You don't have to sit and bitch and complain about it. You don't have to attack the creators on a personal level and tell them they're a bunch of idiots and make a bunch of racial slurs. You're not it is, but it still doesn't mean I'm still going to say don't do it. Right.
Right. That's what I'm saying, though. You shouldn't do it because but it's so easy. That's why they do it. And it's just,
I know it's ridiculous. It's if you don't like, speak with your wall. If you don't like something, just don't talk about it. Don't buy it.
Well, what is your parents and my parent and every parent ever said for so long? If you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Exactly.
I mean, what happened to that?
Right. I don't know. If you go out and you buy a comic book and you don't like the story or whatever, that's fine. If you want to post on Twitter, bought the comic book, didn't care for it, that's fine. But if you go buy a comic book and you want to make a video of you stabbing it and burning it and pissing on it and calling the creator a fucking idiot over and over again, you're a douchebag. You're an asshole. Shut the fuck up.
Well, give it an honest review. Say why you didn't like it, and then just leave it at that.
But stabbing it with a knife and lighting it on fire and pissing on it, and then calling the creator a bunch of racial names and shit. Oh yeah, the new Iceman book that happened too, because Iceman's gay now, and somebody.
Iceman's gay now. That actually makes sense.
he's been gay for 5 years.
Oh,
but, yeah. But I mean, he came out 5 years ago. But yeah, he's a gay character now, and that's what he says. It does make sense for Iceman to be gay. He's always been kind of effeminate, and it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it would be weird if they said Green Arrow was gay. Or Spider-Man was gay all of a sudden. That would be
Iceman's
weird.
Okay, I see it.
Yeah. I'd be like, that doesn't bother me. I mean, it wouldn't even bother me if they said Batman was gay.
No, I wouldn't care. All right.
Well, because he doesn't ever go with anybody. He's never been serious. I mean, they had this whole freaking thing with Catwoman, which pissed a lot of people off.
I know.
And they didn't even go through with it. So it's like, okay, well, why didn't you go through with the wedding? Do you have some feelings that you're keeping underneath?
Do you miss Dick Grayson?
Do you miss Dick Grayson? I don't know. I mean, it wouldn't shock me. You know what I mean? Superman loves Lois Lane, so it's.
Yeah, there's honest to God love there.
Yeah, for a long time, and Spider-Man and Mary Jane, and and Green Arrow and Black Canary.
Yep.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's all, they have established relationships for a long time. So it wouldn't make sense. Iceman, that makes kind of a lot of sense.
It does. It's I don't know. I'm not a fan of just verbally bashing creators and people and the books because you hated them or whatever. If you hate them, give it away, right?
Yeah.
Take that book and donate it to a library or recycle it or whatever. I think
some people have the issue, though, is that they're doing diversity's sake. Like we've said in the past, just make new characters that are awesome.
Just make new characters.
But don't just do things because you want to make a quota. And that's what it feels like to some people. Like they're just trying to fill a quota. And I get that, but they're going about it I think they're going about it the wrong.
I think so too. I think I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts on that I don't want to get to on the air.
Yeah.
But
I maybe think someday, just not on this one.
Maybe
because
someday.
This is completely off topic with what we're talking about.
Right. I mean, as this episode is going to be basically, I think it's going to be called, we'll call it the greatest impact in comics, and we'll just see how people react to that.
Yeah, the greatest impact in comics. Hint. It's not Batman metal.
Yeah, it's not Batman metal, and there are no variants.
Oh man! All right, I think that's a pretty good show.
I think it's a tight, consistent show. We were never off topic one time, and we made our points valid. And
we were
all the way
never
through.
Off topic. Never.
No, not one time. Not
one
once.
time.
Not one tangent in this non-tangent episode.
If you've made it this far into the episode and you have the most iconic thing that you feel happened in comic book history, share it with us on Twitter, on Facebook, email us at spoilercountry@gmail.com and tell us what you think and why you think something should be considered the most iconic happening in comic bookdom.
Yeah, we would love to know. We would love to hear that from you. And also, you could call us at 707-656-2080 and leave it there too if you wanted to.
Yeah, you could. You could, and don't forget, we are actually heard everywhere podcasts are.
Yeah, everywhere. And we just did our outro backwards, and I'm done. So
We are done. That was actually worked out really, really well. So
it did. So
don't forget to open your mind.
And read more.
Or we could say read more and
open your mind.
Good. Later.